Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Sharlee Dixon. My guest today is Dr. Joshua Hall. Joshua is the Medical Director and Senior Quality Officer at Crossroads Treatment Center and Chief Medical Officer at the Phoenix Center in South Carolina. Dual board certified in family medicine and addiction medicine, he has dedicated his career to improving care for individuals with substance use disorders. With extensive experience leading programs that support justice-involved populations, Dr. Hall focuses on compassionate, evidence-based approaches to recovery. He brings a deep commitment to helping patients transition safely from incarceration to community care, reducing relapse and promoting long-term success. In this episode, we'll explore Joshua's journey and insights into treating substance use disorder among justice-involved populations, focusing on the innovative soft reentry program in South Carolina that gently engages patients during incarceration, supports them after release, and uses medication-assisted treatment and peer support to reduce relapse and recidivism. Oh, Joshua, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Welcome.
Good morning.
Josh, I had a lot of fun learning more about your program, and I actually have past experience with Crossroads. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but for now, I'm curious, what brought you into this work as a clinical director?
One of the things that inspired me the most as I grew up was knowing that most of my family didn't come visit us when I was a kid because most of them had substance use disorder issues, and my mother and father had kind of tried to flee from that. My dad joined the military, got out of the area in Florida where there was a lot of problems, and, took us over to Georgia where we were raised in the nice, wonderful country, had a good time living outside of a military base. I grew up with people of all colors, all sizes, all cultures, and that being a part of that melting pot, and then going out into a rural area where it was so different was two marked parts of my life. And then as I began to work in different fields, I worked as a bartender, as a landscaper, as a jack of all trades, everywhere from laying sod on a golf course to just making my way through the construction industry. I had about 5 years there where I was a little on the wild side and a little bit gave my mom all the gray hairs that she didn't deserve, right? But those three parts of my life all formed into something where I always knew I either wanted to be a pilot and a doctor, and it turns out that without surgery, I'm blind, so I could not be a pilot. So I wanted to be a doctor. I ended up starting out as a volunteer paramedic, rode the trunks, learned what I was doing, and then became a respiratory therapist where I've shared with several people, I worked in the ER and the trauma ICU in Savannah, Georgia, where we saw a lot of accidents. We saw a lot of trauma that was probably substance use disorder related in a lot of ways. Alcohol, drugs, running up 75 and 85 on that corridor. We saw a lot of things. And also my previous past came to bear where a lot of the people would come in high or intoxicated or on an unknown substance. And they, it would be terrible the way they say it now, right? But they'd be like, hey, Josh, there's some of your people in room 5. Just go figure out what's going on, right? And just coming from a very mixed pot background, I always found that I could walk in the room, I could talk to people, I could say, hey, what's going on? And we ended up usually having some rapport and becoming some kind of a symbiotic relationship where we actually got healthcare done, which was always exciting for me. And then one day I was talking about how all the doctors never listen to the patients, and my future wife, who was a nurse there at the time, said, you are griping a lot and you're doing little about it. Why don't you go to med school? And I said, that's not such a bad idea. I said, maybe I'll go to be a nurse practitioner. And she said, no, you really want to boss people around. And she said, you really like to have your opinion known. And she goes, but it's always a good thing. All the patients talk about how you talk to them and how you go in and explain things. And one of the things I'd found was interesting was I would go in and explain in layman's terms what the patient was actually facing or suffering. And it didn't take much, right? Like, hey, they've got you on this because your heart isn't doing so well. It doesn't squeeze very well because you drank too much for Christmas. And we know, let's talk about your heart right now, but let's also talk about not drinking too much for Christmas. And as I went through medical school, one of the things that I did was I volunteered at a methadone clinic. And the interesting thing is I actually volunteered so that I wouldn't have to work. It was well known in our little group of students that if you literally made it known that you did not care really about the subject and that you were checking a box, then they didn't really want you there that much, right? And that's sad. But to know that there were that many people that did act that way made me so bad on the second day when I realized that I really was enjoying it. I was really talking to all the patients. I really became someone who I was there an hour early, which was not usually my thing, and I was there a little late, and I spent some time with the counselors, and I actually started talking with a lot of the patients. And one of the things that shocked me is as I was going on through the rest of mine, I spent my third and fourth year for medical school in one area. They call it, where you're just in one block. You don't do any kind of traveling very much. You stay in the same area. And what broke my heart, but also made me so happy, is I ran into a lady at Walmart, and she just said, "Hey, Dr. Hall." And of course, she didn't know I wasn't a doctor all the way yet, but she said, "Hey, Dr. Hall, look." And one of the comments I had actually made to her on the last day I saw her was, sometimes you don't have to be perfect. You just maybe need your kids to have shoes and go to school. And she said, look, I bought all my kids' shoes. They're going to school now. And I'm working at Walmart and I have a job." And she goes, "And I haven't done anything in 7 months. And I'm like about to get my custody back, about to get a driver's license back." Like, it was a country song backwards. And it was just the best thing. And at that moment I knew, like, that was what I wanted to do. I mean, that was the thing that I felt more than anything else that I'd done since then. And while I can talk to anybody about diabetes and hypertension, I always felt very frustrated with those things because I don't think I had a bond with them. And most of the people that know me, just like being on this podcast, will tell you that I'll talk about substance use disorder until you won't let me talk anymore.
And so right before we came on, we were discussing that I'm from South Carolina, and I worked in Child Protective Services as a social worker before moving on to other parts of social work. And one of the agencies that I worked with was Crossroads. They have a part that works with Child Protective Service families. And you just mentioned having worked with a woman who was trying to get custody back of her children and working really hard to create that level of stability for herself and for her children. And as we spoke, that is one of the things that I used Crossroads for. And even the Phoenix Center in Greenville, while it wasn't close to where we were, we would send women and their children there for help and support. And one of the things that the agency that I work for, Department of Social Services, loved about Crossroads is that you guys really work with all different types of populations. So people that are considered specialty populations, folks that may be incarcerated or have co-occurring mental health disorders. And so I really want to park for a second and discuss some of those parts of your agency that work with those specialty populations, specifically justice involved folks. So can you explain the concept of the soft entry program and what makes it so special? What is it doing and why is it so critical for individuals that are transitioning out of incarceration?
Well, the idea of a soft entry program it was kind of developed in response to the high rate of overdose deaths in the justice involved population. So what we have basically done is we've looked at that population and tried to meet them where they're at. So the idea used to be is that you would try to find the population out and about, right? You would find them after they've been released, but yet they were unhoused. They were jobless. They were in between primary care. They were in between psychiatric help. They were in between counselors. So the idea in the very beginning that I didn't come up with personally, but the idea was to figure out how can we work with the patients before. So when I first came to South Carolina, an awesome nurse practitioner, Jerry Deal, was working with me. And this was before any of my Crossroads times, but I was slowly building a substance use disorder treatment plan throughout South Carolina. And what his plan was is his primary goal and passion was long-acting injectables for antipsychotics at the jail. So he had worked tirelessly in the Spartanburg area, Spartanburg, South Carolina, to start getting samples and other things done so that these antipsychotics could be given to the patients before they left the jail so they didn't have moments of instability. So it's amazing, but we kind of thought about, well, why isn't anybody doing this for our substance use disorder population? Why do we allow this population to leave and be unstable without any kind of, further foresight? And so we spoke with several places, and Crossroads is currently working with several different correctional facilities in different states. And I'm currently personally involved with the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center in Columbia, South Carolina. So, and that's really one of my big pushes right now, is to work with them and to not recreate the wheel, but take that and a lot of things that have been pioneered in South Carolina and in North Carolina, in Colorado and New Mexico, and take that population and support them. So one of the things that we know is that it's pretty crucial for communities, as approximately 65% of our justice involved individuals meet the criteria for a substance use disorder, and that's compared to 17.3% of the general population.
Wow.
The justice involved individuals are 40 times more likely to die of an overdose in the first 2 weeks. This is usually after their release from incarceration to the general population. So this is someone leaving and getting out of the jail. Now, what we started with was just the idea that we needed to intercept that patient miraculously after release, but before any problems occurred. And that's how a lot of the ideas started, but that just kept coming into that same concept. So Columbia has really impressed me with the Alvin Glenn Detention Center. What we're actually doing is working with behavioral health, with counseling, and other groups to meet the patients before they leave the facility. So they're already in treatment and they're already talking to somebody before they go. They already have the name of Crossroads Treatment Centers in their hand. They already have a card. They can do an intake. Literally, we can take them to any kind of cellular device that has video and do an intake for buprenorphine involved products the minute they walk out of the jail. We can have them an appointment for methadone prescriptions the next day within 24 hours. And with the best part about it being that we've actually worked with the DA there, who actually allows us to have a conversation with them about patients, when and where they're going to discharge from different court levels, so that we can even have a good idea of when and how. And so it is a bunch of hands shaking other hands in a way that I just haven't seen done in a lot of communities. You sometimes have one activist, you have one group, but Crossroads and Alvin S. Glenn and the community and the criminal justice system are all coming together to support the patient from the beginning to the end. We're even going to initiate a screening so that we can initiate treatment in our population, even for the ones who have not been involved in treatment before.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. That's something that, like you mentioned, I haven't heard of going on in other parts of the country. That's amazing.
I am. And, one of the studies that was done by the University of New Mexico, basically showed that you change a lot with continuation of treatment, but you change lives with initiation of treatment. And for so long, the only way we would do this was if you came into the correctional facility and you already had an arrangement with the methadone clinic, an SUD, an MOUD clinic of some sort, right? Well, that's the problem, is that so those people were already in treatment. But that's where the biggest change, I think, is occurring now in our entire population, is that we're now taking patients that are not involved in MOUD. We're looking to screen them to stop the recidivism that is going to happen when they leave the jail, and have them on a different path when they get out, that they were not on that trajectory before they came in.
Got you. What does that level of support look like? You mentioned some medication assistance type stuff. Like, what else is in place to really help patients not revisit, not come back to jail, not, being able to be safe while they're out? How do you continue that level of care? What does that look like?
Peer support and counselors can go into the jail on certain days and speak with the patients in groups, which we already haven't. That's already occurring right now at Alvin S. Glenn. It's a pilot program, and that's going really well. And then overall, we have counselors, we have peer support, we have people that can help you get insurance. We have a different group of people that can help with the entire scene. And the best part about it for me is that Crossroads is one of those few people where I tell my patients to come in that this is one of the few places where you're not special in a good way, right? As a lot of other places, you're special because you're trying to hide your substance use disorder. Everything you do is filtered. Everything you do has a certain level of maybe innuendo or a concept of shame where you can't really fully flesh out what you're doing because you don't want to tell the person that you're involved with of what's going on. Whereas when you come in there, I tell all my patients, there's very little that you can say at this point in life that's going to scare or shock me. And that's a good thing, right? We're going to work, we're going to talk. You can say almost anything that you think would scare everybody else in the medical community. We'll literally just be like, yeah, had a guy that did that last Thursday. So, well, I already actually know what we're going to do for that. Let's go. Let's talk, right?
Right.
And so it's just a blessing to be able to do that for folks that don't expect it.
Very nice, very nice. Because feeling like you said, feeling special in that way that you are so different from everyone else that you don't even feel like you can be honest with yourself or with your provider, is a recipe for recidivism. You're bound to return if you are able to be honest with yourself and be able to seek that treatment that you need. That's awesome.
Yes, the numbers for that are 62% of all individuals released from state prisons are rearrested in 3 years and 83% in 9 years. So in the current numbers from the last decade, 83% of our population that we treat without any kind of interaction will come back into the penal system again.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Whether you're a longtime or first-time listener to Behavioral Health Today, you're probably familiar with Triad, the company that brings you this podcast. But you may not know that Triad also hosts a community for current and aspiring behavioral and mental health professionals, featuring trending content and education and career resources, all for free. If you are a behavioral or mental health professional, or you're studying to become one, join more than 80,000 people on Triad by claiming your free professional account today. Visit us at hellotriad.com/BHT. That's hellotriad.com/BHT and join the Triad community today.
Wow. So what type of work is done once patients are released to try to, keep them engaged? I know that it can be difficult, especially when folks are returning to those same environments. So how do you guys work to help them create new paths for themselves?
Well, the best part about Crossroads is that we didn't start yesterday. So we have warm handshake relationships with so many places in so many towns, right? So we can tell you the primary care doctor that's not going to look at you funny. We can tell you the dentist that will pull your teeth on a payment plan or that will give you dental care on, for insurances that are not normally taken. Almost all of our counselors are in some form of recovery to be a peer support person. And then we have other counselors that are all working on different levels of being a counselor and just having a different level of experience through all of the people that you run through at Crossroads. It's warm as it's an open hug, right? We're trying to get you to come in. We're trying to get you. All we want to do is get you in the door and love you. And if we can do that, then you can see that it can be a different experience than some of the other things that might have been done, the different treatments.
Absolutely. There's a huge difference in that warm handoff and pass off than just here's a list of places, go figure it out. Completely different experience.
And we have something I call the honeymoon period, which is where you have sobriety, you have some realization. And during that time, for me, that's the best time to impact change at all levels: healthcare, mental health, psychology. We help people get jobs. We know where sober living houses are. We know where, obviously, one of the things that we do deal with all the time, and I don't take any offense at the different levels, but you have certain places where you can go and take medicine. You have certain places where you can't go and take medicine. And I'm constantly evangelizing that medicine is just another path to stability. It's like insulin for diabetes. There's just some level of diabetes that you need medication to treat. And if you do really well, you might come off the insulin. It's the exact same world we live in. There's no differences in our examples. So I use that very, very simple argument to try to chat with people about how we work with people who are in recovery and who need all the help we can, but sometimes have resources diverted based on maybe the level of care or how they're getting their care.
Nice, nice. So on the opposite side of this, are there challenges? What are some of those challenges that you guys are facing when providing substance use disorder treatment within the correctional system, and how do you guys overcome them?
Well, the biggest thing we face is stigma and basically old school approaches to substance use disorder, which is changing in the correctional facilities daily. That's what we're actually seeing is either by force, by lawsuits, by the Department of Justice looking into the impact of substance use disorder being a ICD-10 code, being affiliated with the American Disabilities Act. And it's becoming part of the package that is a part of the human right of our citizens, right? You are allowed to be treated for the things that are making you sick. If that's a part of your illness, then you should not be taken away from your medicine. And so that was the biggest thing that has occurred for years is that either through budgetary reasons, methadone and buprenorphine and counseling were not available. And it's not just the MAT portion, but it's the entire MOUD package. But to bring a company in to do it, there has to be some idea of being welcome. And for much of the country, we're still not welcome, right? We're seen as a treatment that's for people who can't just correct their problems themselves.
Mm.
And again, if the entire world could correct all their problems themselves, then not only would I not have a job, but
Oh,
there'd be a lot of doctors that didn't have jobs and a lot of lawyers that didn't have jobs. The whole world is based around helping people, and so it's something that's a deep part of Crossroads is keeping all of those people in our minds, keeping them up front in our conversations, and making sure that even if we annoy everybody, I'm always like, hey, but what about this? But we could do this too. Right? And as soon as you give me this, I'm going to ask for this. I tell all my patients and anybody that works with me, I think I'm like the elementary school teacher, right? I'm like, listen, you were getting F's and now you got D's. That was amazing. Now let's get a C plus. All right, we got a C plus, but I'm trying to get to A's, right? I want to get to the A's. We're not going to stop until everybody's happy and you're acing all your tests, right? We're not going to be happy with mediocrity, and we're not going to be happy with just acceptance. We want to be, acceptance with reluctance. We want acceptance because it's good for all of the people.
Awesome, awesome. And speaking of positivity, like I mentioned earlier, I have experiences with Crossroads. And again, it was on a different side of it. It was more moms and dads trying to regain custody of their children from the foster care system. And so I've got my own bit of success stories there. But can you share a success story or an example where early intervention in the facility has a meaningful or has had a meaningful impact on a patient's recovery journey?
You know what? I do. And one of the other things I would say is I like what you just said because that's what I see myself as. I see in this job, I feel like I have one of the largest ripple effects that I could possibly have in healthcare. Right? We're taking, parents, grandparents, children, moms and dads, and future parents, right? So we're taking the people that are going to raise the next generation and might not raise them so well because of their own stresses, their own coping mechanisms. And we're taking all of those people. And if you can if you can help out a dad, then you can help that mom out. And when you help that mom out, you help her kids out. And when you help those kids out, then you help their grades, you help their social determinants, you help where they're going to be, you know, whether they're going to work, whether they're going to have a low income job or whether they're going to be the first graduate in their family. And that's one of the things that I see being so strong. We had a guy that worked with us at Crossroads, his name was Mark. He's a pretty awesome guy. He's on one of our outcomes pages. We worked with him, but he started out with substance use disorder and a methamphetamine disorder. So he was in and out of rehab multiple times. He had a long story to share. And for what it's worth, his last story was with Crossroads. He came in, he's now employed, he's now got transportation. And this most important thing that he tells everybody though is that, I got kids. I'm a dad to my children. and I'm taking care of business. And his thing is, he says, where there's a will, there's a way. And if you want it, you can get it. But we also helped. We helped provide a lot of those resources that made it a little bit easier, right? It doesn't have to be hard. Of all the things we do, the whole thing we're supposed to be doing in healthcare, in the justice, we're supposed to be bringing people closer to what we're doing, without putting in roadblocks. Those roadblocks are what we've done all of our lives. That's what we're trying to get rid of.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you kind of mentioned this a bit earlier, but beyond those individual, client patient outcomes, let's talk a bit about broader effects on society, such things such as improved public safety or even adjustments or reduced strain on justice system. We were speaking beforehand before we started recording about civil rights violations for those who have substance use disorders and do require the use of medication to, remain on a positive journey. Let's talk a bit about those impacts on the larger society.
All right, so I'll give you the dry numbers. So 2022, $2.6 trillion is spent every year on our correctional facilities, on all of the programs, what it requires to house people in a correctional facility, whether it's done well or not. $2.6 trillion. So one of the things that they've shown that's been the most impactful is that if you treat people who have a continuation of care in the correctional facility, then if you do it if you do 70 days or more, now you do have people, let's go back. So you do have kind of two really large population shifts in the correctional facility. You generally have people that stay 25 days or less, and you have people that stay 150 days or more, and those can skew your numbers a little bit, right? And then you have people that are in between for all different crimes of all different natures, all possibly heading to different areas to a more intensive level of security, or leaving the facility completely with done and having served your time for your community. But what we know though is that we do see a effect on crime in the area. When you have MOUD, you have less recidivism, and you bring in those patients that have the highest percentage of both what we call property crimes. Those are your little crimes that get you a little jail time. A little jail time means that you never live in the same apartment. You never get your mail the same place. You're never able to pay rent very often anywhere. You're constantly on somebody else's couch, and a job never takes you because you have 52 holes in your job application, right? Like, so, but those little spots of jail ruin everything. They ruin your reliability, and so that's where that recidivism keeps coming back in. Well, again, to get to that number though, initiation, when we treat people that have had no care, then they generally see after 70 days, that average stay for them is 22 days less. And for someone who has continuation, the average reduction in stay overall for crimes of care for is 60 days. It's up to 60 days. So if you think about a $2.6 trillion entity, and we could take away from almost every person that's involved with either not going back at all or having a reduction in the severity of their crime and spending less time in jail every day that they do that, even for the hardest core person who has zero worries about my patients, then I can just tell you that how about that when they're out, they're paying taxes, and when they're not, they're using your taxes, right? So financially, it makes sense. When they're in a correctional facility, their mental health is not supported as well. That is not a slur on any correctional facility. It is just simply impossible to work with proper mental health care for the incarcerated population. There's too much need there to do everything inside. So, it saves money, it saves time, it reduces crime, it makes our patients happy, and it produces better citizens. I don't know why you wouldn't want to do it. And in several of my meetings, I was in Denver and I was talking with the DEA, and we were talking about different programs inside New Mexico, inside Colorado. And one of the things that I came back and I started talking to our more southern states is the idea that I don't think they're going to get to choose much longer to not treat our patients or to treat our patients. So one of the things that's happening right now, and one of the reasons why, again, sometimes bad decisions lead to good outcomes. Well, several people in New Mexico and Colorado specifically were in the right position to have their continuation was blocked by the system in a very obvious an upfront way. They said, we're not going to take care of you. And the Department of Justice came in and said, you violated their American Disability Act rights. You violated their care for medicine, and you blocked the ability for them to get the proper amount of care. One of the lines actually said, like, you endangered this person's health by not providing a constitutional level of health care, which the Department of Justice now considers in multiple proven court cases to include MOUD. So
Wow.
one of my pitches, one of my strongest pitches was it's very interesting. And I think this is probably the best or worst thing I've ever said, but I came into some of our group meetings. I said, I have come in for 2 years and I've pleaded for your consideration and I've begged for grant money. And now I'm going to tell you that unless you want to start writing $80,000 to $250,000 checks to individual people who you're violating their rights, and it's going to happen, let's start working on a budget now. Right?
Yeah.
You keep telling me that it's hard to find money, but you're going to find money for the $1 million that you lose every year for not doing this.
Mhm.
And every correctional facility that's lost their legal battle or is settled, guess what? They suddenly have an
Money.
MOUD program that is court ordered
Mhm.
to be enacted. So don't
Wow.
make them tell you. Choose to do it before. Let's start working for solutions now instead of having to have a court settlement that not only costs a lot of money for everyone and comes at the cost of somebody's health that had to have that kind of a legal case brought. It's always done it with someone suffering. So let's not do that.
Yeah. Proaction instead of reaction, for sure.
I love it. There's cases in multiple states. Or Indiana. I mean, I can go down the list with you. Indiana, Kentucky, multiple prisons, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Massachusetts Parole Board, Unified Judicial System of Pennsylvania, Massachusetts Trial Court, multiple employers who all terminated patients for being on MOUD, all of which ended up either rehiring or paying them a very happy severance package. Everyone is coming together for this. We just want everyone to get on board willingly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As we were talking and doing my research as well, it really sounds like Crossroads is really trying to work kind of alongside patients and really just meeting them where they are. How does this philosophy influence both treatment outcomes and your team's approach?
Because of my rather wild past, one of the things I tell all of my patients is like, I'm very different. I'm the first doctor in my whole entire family ever, and I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks with an enlisted Air Force dependent, bad insurance, bad, but loved. But when we had it, it was good. We enjoyed it, but what I like to tell my patients is I try to doctor sideways. I don't want to come from high, and I don't want to come from below. I tell folks, I'm like, listen, I'll just tell you that I know where you're from because I don't want to talk about my past too much. That gets into triggering. That gets into glorification of old actions. And we don't want to do that. But let's just say that I used to smoke and now I don't. I used to have other substances that I didn't have a full control on, and now I don't. And you wouldn't want me to be your doctor if I told you, hey, I've only stopped doing things for 2 weeks. That wouldn't make any sense either, right? On the other hand, I don't want to come in as somebody who's never had any experience, never had any concept of what it's like to have poor transportation or crappy insurance or the concept of just being poor, right? We know in America that it's rags to riches is awesome, but staying poor isn't that much fun. And so the whole idea is to take people who have their activities of daily life, all of those things are limited and to bring them. So to get back to your question, I like to doctor sideways. I tell all of my patients, we work with you. We don't tell you what to do. We'll suggest, but we'll also know that everybody here knows your story and we're going to do individualized care. That's one of the things that I love that Crossroads has allowed me to do and to hopefully change that culture for a lot of folks that I work with is that no algorithms, no big box solutions, right? Take a look at every patient you have, and you may come up with the same solution for multiple people, but do it for different reasons. Do it for individualized care of the person based on what they need at that time. And Crossroads allows us to do that. And so many of our providers are implementing that into their care. And it's that and harm reduction concept of working with the patient to build structure, not force structure, is what I think is the biggest change in our lives. if I had to tell anybody that wants to work with anybody that's someone in their family, is that our human nature is to force our structure on other people. And that doesn't work very well unless you have the kind of relationship where forcing is more suggesting, and the relationship comes out of love and empathy and time and seeing somebody again and again, and where it's not about only a cash payment. It is not only about their availability. It's about all of those things put together. All of our patients start out with transportation issues. All of our patients start out with other things that just make it hard because their lives are full of social complications that, that's our whole goal, is to solve all of those a little bit at a time.
Very nice. Very nice. So, Joshua, for listeners who want to learn more about Crossroads and the South Carolina program, or to just get involved, where can they find resources?
So one of the best ones that we have is the Crossroads website, and we have different parts of those pages. We have something called our outcomes that you can get on a look at. We actually have a dedicated part of our website that is for the soft reentry program. We have different pages to allow people to donate time, donate money, to look at pairing and sharing energy and resources as a more of a synergistic. Our website's great. A couple of phone numbers that I could share that will allow you to get in touch with Crossroads would be the referral partners can use 877-848-9294. This is for anyone that just wants information about the company or has a possible patient that they would like to send, or a relative or friend, anybody that they would like to get a referral started. And then if you are an individual who is seeking treatment yourself, you can call 855-694-8288, and you will talk to our call center that can work with the instant intake team and or a scheduler to get you into the office as soon as possible. One of the biggest things we're now premiering that came out in a great time for our soft reentry program, but we're doing instant intakes for people where we actually employ doctors, including myself. So where there's just a bunch of folks who are available at different times. So on certain days of the week, I may do an intake at 9:30 at night. We partner with that, a 24-hour pharmacy and video calls, and we can get you taken care of when you want to. One of the hardest things in substance use disorder treatment, I think for everyone, is that you have times where you really are stronger in the idea of wanting recovery, and that's not always 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So we want to offer recovery to anybody at any time, anywhere. And so one of the things that we're utilizing is some of the new abilities is to use telehealth to do admissions and then bring you in very quickly to still do that warm handoff, that warm welcome, but to start your first interaction on a positive note at any time that you think you're ready.
That is awesome. That's awesome. Joshua, I really appreciate you speaking with us today.
I am excited. I love it. I tell everybody, like, listen, I'll talk about this until you absolutely shush me, right? But don't ask me about diabetes. I'll just be like, don't eat white bread. All right? That's the start.
You're so right, Josh. Thank you so much for being on the show today. And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to join us. You can follow us on our social media at Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, and more at Behavioral Health Today. And if you like our show, give us 5 stars and leave us a review. As always, the resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.